Hello, everyone. My name is Frederic Cardin. Welcome to another Panam 360 interview. Today, I have the great honor of receiving and welcoming Howard Skempton. He is one of the great contemporary composers of the last 50 or so years. Howard Skempton, whose music has been called by one scholar the emancipation of consonance. And that is true. In the 1960s, in an age of dodecaphonism, serialism, stark atonalism, and dissonance, his style of music was based on something else completely: simplicity, melody, tonality, and consonance. And for that, he has been linked with the minimalist movement. His music is admired by musical theorists and casual listeners and non-specialists equally. It is played everywhere, and one such place, well, it will be Montreal, because in the next coming days, the Suoni per il Popolo Festival will be hosting two programs with Howard Skempton live. He's here in Montreal. The first one of these events is going to happen on June 14th, where Howard Skempton will talk with Robert Hasegawa from McGill University in front of the public about his career and music in general. And on June 16th, a concert that promises to be memorable will see Howard Skempton himself on accordion, playing some of his pieces, the Bozzini Quartet playing two string quartets of his, and all of them together in some other music. That promises to be very, very interesting. So welcome, Howard Skempton. Thank you for having accepted this invitation.
Frederick.
Hello, Mr. Skempton. Very, very glad, and I'm honored to have you with us. Frankly,
Well,
it's a privilege.
I'm delighted to talk to you. It's my first morning
Your
in
first
Montreal.
morning, yeah. I hope it's not too hard on you.
I'm told, I woke up at 5:15 this morning, which of course is 10:15 UK time, so
Yes,
quite late for me.
yeah. Two of your quartets will be played. Your two quartets. Can you tell
Yeah,
me?
there
You
is a
tell us
third, but
about what they sound
yeah.
like? What the tendrils is the first one, and there's another one also. So,
Well, Catch was the earlier one actually, but
oh,
Catch,
catch. All right.
the clue is in the title. It's very canonic. I became interested in writing canons. It was my way back to working with line. Having written melodies, I then started writing children's rounds, and that led me on to canons and eventually to developing my language and thinking about the way I'd used voice leading without thinking too seriously about it, but always, what happens when you put lines together when notes are moved horizontally, as it were. Um, and so Catch is a largely canonic piece, very structured. Tendrils is just pure canon. It's 55 canons, and that was about 4 years later. But it's a sequence of 55 canons that are simply that again is this thing about continuity.
Yeah.
How do things follow on? And I to some extent conceal the joins between the canons, so you get this sense of a permanently undulating,
Yeah.
evolving music, which is what I've always loved about string music. The texture of Purcell's Fantasia, the texture,
Yeah.
even the Art of Fugue or something. When you think about it, that sort of pure string texture is something I wanted to capture in tendrils.
And the continuity of the sound and yeah, I mean, and I think that's why they're so popular, and people will absolutely love, I'm sure of it. And 2 days before, on June the 14th, it will be about you talking about yourself, your music, your career with Robert Hasegawa from McGill University. You'll be talking, of course, about the scratch orchestra. So, for the benefit of our audience, what if you can synthesize, what was the Scratch Orchestra? What was your role in it? What was it about?
Well, it's extraordinary to look back now, nearly 55 years to the founding of the orchestra, because I studied with Cornelis Cardew. I decided I needed to study with Cornelis Cardew because he'd worked with Stockhausen, he'd worked with Cage, and I was interested in both. And so I studied privately with Cornelis. And very quickly, I joined a new class which he ran at a place called Morley College in London. And the Morley College class was the nucleus for what became the Scratch Orchestra, because at Morley College we rehearsed a piece by Cardew called The Great Learning. And he decided that we needed more players than the Morley College class could provide. So we had to recruit friends and ask people like Brian Eno came in, to play. And in the end, I think we had an inaugural meeting, and then we put on concerts. And it's a great thing to do. You set a date, you put on a series of concerts at town halls, and then you think, well, what are we going to play? So a lot of it was improvised.
Improvisation, yeah, that was one of the bases of it, and also welcoming anybody. I mean, some people
Yeah.
could come in, and even if they weren't musicians, they could just wave around. I don't know, do I mean that was
Well,
the
it was very extraordinarily democratic, you see, and the meetings reflected that. We used to wait until Cornelius Cardew turned up, but it was very much. Somebody described it as being rather like a Quaker meeting, Society of Friends meeting, people sitting around, and it was very comfortable for everyone. And Cornelius, although he was the a figure of authority, he didn't tell us what to do. And so one of the first rules we had was, right, no electronics.
Oh,
Because as soon as somebody plugged a contact mic in, they made it, it meant that somebody playing a chime bar on the, in the
right.
far corner of the room wouldn't be heard, And
Okay.
so I think the whole idea of scratch music, Cardew's idea was that that everybody writing individual, if everybody wrote a piece of scratch music, and that's almost like a quiet activity which would be accompanimental in character. It might become a solo, but essentially a piece of scratch music is an accompaniment. And so Cardew had this very beautiful idea of 30 or 40 players producing essentially accompanimental pieces which coexisted.
Mm.
And I think that's something I find very attractive, and that's one can imagine Cage's music or a lot of experimental music existing in that way, in an almost ambient way. And I'm sure it influenced Brian Eno to some extent. The idea that this very quiet music allowed different types of music to coexist.
Yeah.
In something like in a sort of harmonious way, one
Yeah.
could say.
Of course, the Scratch Orchestra is one part of your career. It's a spectacular one, because, like you said, it's still being mentioned today, it's still being talked about, but it's only part of your career. Then you went on, and you had, and you still have a personal career that is very rich. Currently, you have the choice, or you had an opportunity to go study with Stockhausen, but you did study in place with Cardew. I guess that it had a monumental influence of on the rest of your career afterwards. If you had studied with Stockhausen, would you have been the composer you are right now? Do you think so?
No, I think I was interested in Stockhausen, very interested uh, when I was at school. The point is that this is interesting, you see, because I was a member of a choir at school, and but there was no. I mean, music wasn't a strong thing at school. I had to study A level on my own. I wasn't allowed to. I had to fight to do A level music, and study it on my own. So this was at the higher level. Because I was studying it on my own, I was reading books about Stockhausen,
Mm.
and I was interested in Cage. That's when I discovered Cage. And then Cardew, I think that what Cardew did, and Cardew is crucially important. I don't think I ever stopped being influenced by Cardew. And the fact is, but there's always what we call a chicken egg thing here. The fact is that I wrote my first piece, a humming song, before I studied with Cardew. So I think I recognized something in Cardew that I was interested in anyway, and
Right.
probably got from Morton Feldman and from Cage. But I think what Cornelius told me, and certainly what the Scratch Orchestra told me, was that I shouldn't be concerned about electronic music, because when I was interested in Stockhausen, I was particularly interested in the electronic music. I thought that was my future.
The first part of your career was made of really small pieces, 1 minute long, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. More than that, it was quite rare. And mostly solo piano, solo accordion. That's it. And and then you moved on to bigger ensembles and up to the symphony orchestra, which is the biggest one you can have in Western music, maybe in world music. So why was at in this first period of your career, why did you concentrate only on solo instrument? Was that for a lack of opportunities or other reasons? And then when you moved to bigger ensembles, how much of a stretch was it for you to go there? And how much did it change the way you compose music?
I think I always felt, well, I'm a lyric poet. I can write these small pieces. I can focus on the essence of something. I can capture that moment, and that's probably enough. And with the accordion, which I bought for the Morley College class because I wanted a portable instrument, mainly to play drones, but I realized that people started taking an interest in it. There was a classic case, actually, of doing something because I needed a portable instrument, and then being encouraged by others who said, well, this is just like nothing else. This is the real you had. Even Cardew said this. At the first, when I bought the instrument, I took it to a Morley College class. He said, Howard, what are you doing? Why the accordion? Why didn't you buy a banjo? He said. Anyway, after about an hour, I'd been playing this, and he came up to me and he said, I have to hand it to you. You found your instrument. That I was obviously playing it in a very natural way. It was something about the extrovert nature of it, or the breathing of it, or something. But I just found it very easy. And then I taught myself the rudiments, this being a very small instrument, and I started writing melodies. And of course, that was a shock. Writing these tunes, why these tunes? Well, it's what you do with the 12 bass accordion. So in a way, I was encouraged to play by the reactions of others. And I started playing pieces in the concerts I was doing with Michael Parsons. First of all, they were light relief at the end of the concert, and gradually they moved center stage. So now that I'm playing those pieces with the Bozzinis on Sunday, so those pieces, you could say I talked about the piano pieces being the central nervous system and the accordion pieces being a heart. And I think for about 20 years, they were the main thing I did. But I wrote an orchestral piece in 1980. That's
Lento.
10 years before Lento. Yeah. And this was called Chorales, and it was written for the Merseyside Youth Orchestra. And the people at the Merseyside Youth Orchestra said, well, Howard, you only write these small pieces. You've never written for orchestra. Why do you think you can write a 12-minute piece for orchestra for the Merseyside Youth Orchestra? And I got away with this. I don't know how I got away with this, but I said, look, it's because I'm so practical that I haven't written a piece for orchestra, that I think I could write a piece for orchestra. In other words, because I was so practical that I was writing these small pieces, that I felt I was practical enough to write a piece for a youth orchestra. That's a very neat piece of argument. Anyway, they gave me the commission, and what I did was, what I'd done, because I'd made films as a teenager, I'd always been destined to make films, and switched to music at 16, really, because I was a musician, the music was the only thing I could do at school. It was the only thing for which I was awarded prizes, So by default, I turned to music. But that idea of a film, of one thing, of continuity, that flair for continuity, which I think all composers need, is also what filmmakers have. Okay, they do storyboards and so on, but basically with film, you're judging the length of a shot, you're framing the shot, you're interested. Well, I've done this shot, now what's the next shot? How do I follow that in a natural way? If you're a documentary filmmaker, well, you've got somebody walking from left to right. You don't have them walking from right to left in the next shot. I mean, it's just too disruptive. So you learn these lessons about continuity. And in a way, when I composed the chorales for orchestra, there was a sort of narrative sense of, well, I'll do short sections, and then what follows what. And then I found that I started structuring it. So I had, in that piece, I had a sort of three pillars, one at the beginning, one at the end, and one in the middle. And then between each pillar, there were three short movements. So I was constructing it, I was forming it almost as I might form a sequence of short piano pieces or accordion pieces. And that's what I'm doing on Sunday. I'm playing about 6 accordion pieces in a group.
Yeah.
Now, to design that, it's almost, I'm almost going back to, but it's a natural progression from writing short pieces, playing a sequence of them in a concert, to actually designing something which is like a sequence of short pieces. And that's what the chorales was like. Lento is a little bit different. I had these separate parts, but they were much more. I decided very early on that they would all be chorale-like. And so I was able to move them around until they locked into place. And I think what I'm particularly proud of in the case of Lento, having composed the half dozen different sections of it, was actually finding a way in which I could design a very strong structure.
For the casual listener, I mean, the structural beauty and simplicity of the music is maybe not perceptually speaking. Does not bring any effect. What brings effects, what brings emotions for the casual listener mostly, and that's one important part of your music, is the beauty of it, the consonance, melodic qualities of it, tonality of it. But tonality with some you expand and you twerk a bit around, but it's tonal music. This is one important part of it. And why were you always interested in maintaining consonance? One scholar called your music the emancipation of consonance, in a time where other experimentalists were only about dissonance and really stark sounds. You were never about that. So why was, in your spirit, in your personal emotional personality, why is that attachment to melody, consonance, tonality? Why is that?
Frederick, this is very, I mean, you're getting now right to the heart of the matter. I mean, I would say, and I now teach, I mean, I've been teaching for the last 20 years. I mean, it's very difficult to say what makes the composer, but in the end, the music has meaning and the emotions is expressed somehow. And I think that's true right from the start. I think I got a shock when I wrote Humming Song because I could sense the emotion in it and I had to sort of adjust to it. And that was always the case in those early years, that there was something coming out. It may have been growing up with the Beatles. I don't know what it was. It was certainly an interest in Britain's music as well. This sense of the music sort of hit the spot. And the fact is that when you're involved in the process of making music, you get excited about it. You get excited about the way things work. You try and make sense of things. You try and clarify things all the time. And then you allow, I think if you're a composer, I think if you're a composer, then you allow yourself, you have to be intuitive at some point. And Stravinsky talks about this, you make a mistake and then you have to recognize the potential in that mistake. But when you're working, and this must be true surely if you're working in poetry, you need to surprise yourself. You're not quite sure what you're doing, but the fact is that if for music to have character, this is a fundamental statement in a way, for music to have character or to have meaning, there has to be that sort of emotional thrust. I'm quite critical of music that I don't want to hear twice. And I suppose, what is it that gives music character? And I think quite, there is, and I did a class on melody at Royal Birmingham Conservatoire, and not this year because it was proving too difficult. I used to go into that class on melody, and I said, well, the thing about melody is it can't be taught.
Some people are placing you in the minimalist composers, whatever that means. Do you accept that?
I think it would be wrong for me to reject any label, because I think simplicity is fine, because obviously the music is simple. And obviously it's repetitive up to a point. And I was influenced by people like Terry Riley, particularly, because there's an openness to Riley's work. A piece like In C, I took part in the first British performance of In
That's
C, and
true. That's true.
that was thanks to Cardew, and that was before the Morley College class started. So that was one of those events, and I met Frederick Shevsky there, and so on. And so that the idea of repetition, but it came from I think it's the variety of things that became available at that time. I mean, obviously the pop music in England with the Beatles, just over the Mersey from where I was living, was very strong, and Indian music was of great interest to me, as it was to the minimalists like Riley and Lamont Young and Philip Glass as well, and Reich was interested in African drumming. So there was a greater interest in non-Western music at that time. And of course, early music was becoming important and influencing other British composers, Peter Maxwell Davis and Harrison Birtwistle, those composers. But they were clearly mainstream, clearly writing music that was very complex, difficult to read. I think what I've always felt, is that, I admired Webern, I admired this music very much, but I felt that the only way I could write it was to work with, in the way that Cardew did, to reduce the material. I mean, Cardew's scores were beautifully clear. And a friend of his, Kurt Schwerzig, said about Cardew, after Cardew had died, that what he achieved was a sort of radical simplification. So like a mathematician, he would strip the problem down to find a solution and open it up. And I think it's that idea of opening something up, as a poet might. You work on something and you say, a cat sat on the mat, and then you might refine it slightly and make it more complex.
At some point, modernity was in huge complexity. Stockhausen, Boulez, Luigi Nono, whatever, dissonance, and so on. That was modernity. Then they were avant-gardists, they were experimentalists, and they were modernists. Then you are the ones, so many other ones like Lamont Young and John Cage and Philip Glass and so on. Your brand of modernity was more simplicity, consonance, melody, tonality, the bringing back tonality, and so on. You have students that learn from you. What is modernity? If they ask you, how can I be a modern composer? What do you respond to that? Because what else is there to take as modernity and build a new language from?
Yes, well, I'm lucky in a way to teach at Royal Birmingham Conservatoire, where there's no one style. So there are songwriters there, and actually, I think a composer who was a committed modernist would probably prefer to go to the Royal Academy of Music in London. So I think I've always felt that I've always been waiting for a reawakening of interest in Anton Webern.
Right.
I think
he's
there's
important
still
for you.
much
He's
to be
very
learned.
important in your life, Webern, in your
Very important in
music
my life,
thinking.
and I want young composers to discover that again, because in Webern's music there is still the seed of something, as there was for Feldman and Cage and for Stockhausen and Boulez. I don't know whether it was fair to Webern that he was taken up as he became we talk about post Webern. I mean, Webern should be appreciated in his own right, I guess, but there is something about that music. There's a clarity and an efficiency and economy. The crucial thing is to give yourself a problem, a challenge, a musical challenge, because you're a musician. Give yourself a musical problem, a musical challenge, and just focus and just try and make it as strong as possible and as clear as possible, and as it has to make sense. that would be my, even if that sense is nonsense, as it were. You know what I mean?
At least for you, it has to make sense.
It
At
can be
least
a
for
sort of
you.
surreal sense, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you very much. I'm again honored to have the occasion of speaking to you. Thank you very much.
Frederick, thank you very much for so many interesting questions.